Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the DLF Commissioner Chronicles on the DLF YouTube page. Make sure to subscribe and like this video so you can get this video each and every week along with all the other awesome content on the DLF YouTube channel. So today we're going to be focusing on the Dynasty startup. We've covered so far bylaws, every step between the bylaws and the startup, and now we're talking a Dynasty startup draft. What things that you need to do as a commissioner, as the startup, like deciding how to run the startup and what to do during the startup, all the different elements of a Dynasty startup draft as the commissioner. So we'll be going over those today, step by step, and we'll be starting off with live versus slow. That's honestly the first Dynasty startup decision you make as a commissioner is whether it's going to be a live draft or a slow draft. A live draft is what it sounds like. It's usually 30 to 45 second clock with all 12 people on a chat together or in person, obviously preferably, but most people play with startups not in traditional home leagues, many on Twitter or in forums. So a live draft, usually a 30 to 45 second clock for each pick, and you just go through each pick as it goes, and the draft usually finishes in 3 to 4 hours. Now, a slow draft is the more common theme as far as Dynasty startups in the Twitter industry, Dynasty League football industry, and the Dynasty industry in general. More often than not, we're doing slow drafts because it's honestly very hard to get 12 to 16 or even more people in one location at one time. And so that kind of makes it a deal. Makes a live draft startup a little bit harder. It's fun, but it's a little bit harder to put together. So a lot of people do the slow draft avenue. Now, what's a slow draft? A slow draft is there is a clock that is a set amount of time that's not 30 seconds. It's usually 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. It's a time period where you're not going to be sitting your phone like, okay, I'm picking next. It's more so you find out you're on the clock, or you find out you're trying to make a trade, and then you look at your phone or you look at your computer. So slow draft is a little bit different in the fact that it's more of a 10 to 14 day activity rather than a one night 3 to 4 hour activity. So if you're doing a slow draft, the next decision is how long you want your clock to be. Now, if you want it to be a tighter clock, like 4 to 6 hours, I do recommend that you have the timer turn off for a period of time overnight. Usually for my drafts that have a turned off timer, it is between 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Because usually if you have a decent sized timer, then you should be okay just having that 6 hour block cut off. But if you do have some overseas drafters, that could change some things. But personally, as far as my preferences are a 9 hour clock with the timer turned off between 12 to 6. This allows time for trading. This allows time to make sure that you don't have to be glued to your phone. And if you miss, if you're out of space to your phone for 5 to 6 hours, it's not going to auto draft. You're not going to get auto drafted. So that's certainly a key element to when you're deciding how long your clock is. You got to know who your league is, what time zone they live in, and how glued to their phone they are. Some people, need a 12-hour clock. It's like, okay, I'm going to check in once a day, and therefore you give a 12-hour clock. And some people might end up complaining, like, oh, this is going so slow. But at the end of the day, as long as you're not drafting your startup in August, it can go as slow as you really want it to go. Some people are a little more anxious than others, though. So when you're deciding your draft clock, you're kind of just asking, how often are your league mates on your phones? How often are your league mates accessing the draft? And how fast do you want the draft to go? I do think that the best middle ground is that 9 hour clock with the timer turned off from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. But it can be a little bit different if you have overseas drafters. Next, if you're going to have a draft clock, you need to have an auto pick. There has to be some sort of format for what's going to happen when time runs out on that pick. There are two common avenues. First, there is automatic based on ADP. Now, this can be a bit problematic in the Dynasty sphere because oftentimes the ADP for your site, particularly MFL, it's a mixture of redraft and Dynasty. So you might get like a Tom Brady auto draft in the 9th round of your Dynasty startup, which would not be good in a single quarterback league. So there are some issues with an auto draft of based on the time running out. The other option is to skip them, and then the person can make their pick whenever they realize that they got skipped, oh, let's say 3 players got drafted, those 3 players are no longer available to that person, but they can take any other player that is currently on the board. So really, it's either auto draft pick or skip pick, and then getting that pick replaced later on. Personally, I do prefer the auto draft. It's actually a mixture of the both. I prefer auto draft, but if the person notices it in time, they can say, okay, I want this player instead of this player. But one problem with that format is that if the player that got auto-drafted wanted to be selected by a person after that, then it gets a little hairy. So if you want the least problems possible, it probably is do the skip draft pick option and have the person be able to pick any player that's still on the board if a few picks have been made. But those are really the auto pick options as far as auto pick, as far as making it an ADP, or as far as just skipping the pick and making them pick later on whenever they find out that they got their pick skipped. Next, we have our draft date. Obviously, it kind of depends on when you decide you're going to be doing a Dynasty startup as commissioner. If you know right now, okay, I'm going to be doing a Dynasty startup next offseason, you could start as early as December or January. I feel like most startups occur in that February to April range. And then maybe a little bit of break in them more in the July to August. But your draft date does have some impact, like I said earlier, on whether you can do a live or slow draft. You can't really do a slow draft in late August. You can do it in early August if you get it done fast enough. But as far as your draft date affects a number of things, mainly being the rookies and how you can implement those. And we're talking about those in a little bit. But you decide your draft date with your league, and you say, okay, what do we want that works best for us, a league where we're going to be able to be as active as possible, because an active startup is the most fun startup possible, with trading up, trading down, and honestly moving as quickly as possible too. Generally keeps the league active. So whatever is the best solution for your league, that is the best draft date. But we'll talk about the rookies and stuff in a little bit. Next, we have how many rounds. How many rounds your startup is typically your number of roster spots that you decided in your bylaws. So if you have 24 roster spots, you typically have 24 rounds in the startup. Some people think that if you're going to separate the rookie draft and the startup draft, that let's say you have a 6-round rookie draft, then you should do 18 rounds of a startup and then six rounds of rookie draft. I prefer to just do 24 rounds of that startup draft and then expand the roster to 30. And then you can cut down at the end of the offseason from the 6 that were drafted in the rookie draft. So basically, you get the choice. Do you want to cut down some of the rookies? Do you want to cut down some of those later round startup picks that you made? So instead of cutting down your startup, make your startup as big as your rosters, and then add more roster spots for the rookie draft, and then decrease as you at the end of the offseason. Next is trades. One negative part of a live startup is that trades are a lot more difficult, maybe even impossible, depending on your software. It's hard to process a trade in 30 seconds and make that trade. So generally, trades don't happen in a live draft, but they certainly do happen in a slow draft. People trading up, trading down, trading picks for future picks. So I've heard it very minimally, but if you ever thought of not allowing trades in a startup draft, I would highly recommend against not allowing trades in your Dynasty startup, because it's just more fun. It allows for more strategy. Trades only add more activity to your league, and certainly in the startup, that's one of the more primary times your activity is happening. Lastly, we have rookies in the startup. So for this one, I'm going to break it down a little bit in our Word document just to show the avenues that you can go as far as doing your rookies in the startup. The easiest way to go about rookies in the startup is just putting the rookie players in the startup. Now, this is not the preferred method, particularly when you are drafting pre-draft. Some people say, okay, it adds some skill to it. But one of the reasons why I don't like rookie players in the startup, whether it's pre-draft or post-draft, is that it decreases activity a little bit. When you separate them into a startup and a rookie draft, that's 2 separate drafts. And that allows for more action, whether it be trades or just more activity in terms of getting people involved in the league throughout the offseason. So this is my least favorite format as far as doing rookies in the startup is putting the rookie players in the startup, just because I think it's the least activity, it's the least fun. Some people say it's the most strategic, though, especially when you're doing it pre-draft. Next, we have rookie picks in the startup. So in this format, you're putting, instead of you're drafting Joe Burrow in the startup, you're drafting the 101, you're drafting the 102. And so you're drafting the rookie picks. And so when you draft that pick, you own that pick, and then you'll be able to use it in the rookie draft later in the offseason. And obviously that depends on when your draft date is. But let's say you had your startup in April, and then in May you had your rookie draft. That's probably a very common thing of happening. But with this format, it allows lots of trades in terms of it's an asset. You can trade that asset before the rookie draft. You can trade it during the rookie draft. And so that's lots of action going on there. And it's a interesting asset because when you're drafting a player, you're kind of stuck to that player. Yes, you can, trade that player, but there's so much more you can do with a pick than with a player, because everyone wants the 101. Not everyone wants Joe Burrow. So it's certainly a more versatile asset because it doesn't really lose value. Yes, you can lose value if players don't fall in the right spots, but a pick doesn't lose value quite the same way that a player does. So I do think it's the most fun way to go about doing your startup with rookies is putting the rookie picks in the startup. One other avenue that I like to do is rookie slots in the startup. So what's a rookie slot, you say? A rookie slot is when you draft a rookie slot, it's the 101, 201, 301, 401, etc. So basically, when you are drafting the slot, you get every single pick that are in that slot. No matter how many rookie picks you have, you get that first pick. And in this format, obviously you could do it either way, but traditionally the way I've run this format is each person can draft one slot each. So if you draft the 101, you can't then draft the 102 or the 108 or the 112. Now, one of the more interesting strategy elements of this is that if you do nothing, if you don't do anything as a player, and you just take the last one, you get the 112, the 212, the 312, etc. And that just adds an element of strategy that, are you going to pay up for that top slot and get those top rookie picks, or are you just going to get one of those lower picks for free or for a cheaper price? The reason why I like slots and allowing each team to only draft one is that it creates action. Kind of forcing an asset on somebody creates action in, so let's say you get the 112, 212, 312, 412, but you don't want any rookie picks. You want only veterans. You want to win now. Then this creates the action of you can then trade those picks to the other people in the league. To trade them to the people that value those rookie picks higher. So that creates trades. When you force people to have assets they don't necessarily want, then that creates some trading. So I do think it's an interesting way to go about doing rookies in the startup is putting rookie slots and each person drafting one slot. That way it creates action, and it's the more action the better as far as your dynasty startup. So we went through them for today. We had live versus slow, the elements of both, pros and cons. If it's slow, what's your clock? If you got a clock, what's your auto pick strategy, or what's going to happen when someone runs out of time? You have your draft date, whether it's going to be early in the offseason, middle of the offseason, late in the offseason, and certain factors of that. How many rounds and why? Basically, whatever your roster spots, that's how many rounds you should have. Trades, always allow trading in your startup, particularly up, down, future picks, all those fun things. And then rookies in the startup. We went through the three major avenues that I have seen used as far as rookies in the startup. There's the rookie players, the rookie picks, and the rookie slots, and the pros and cons for all three. So hope you enjoyed this edition of Commissioner Chronicles, episode 3. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you guys next week for Dynasty Startup auctions and what to do as a commissioner, things you need to do in order to create a Dynasty Startup auction. Thank you so much. Have a great day.